It doesn't, but
Now it is.
now it is live. Thanks, Wayne. Hi, everyone. It's Barry McGuire here. It's live at 5. It's Thursday, so it must be live at 5. This is where our creative real estate education group talks about, just interesting topics around real estate and particularly around creative real estate. And today, we're going to do a much deeper dive into foreclosures than we've been able to do before. And as our special guest, we have Danielle Bourgeois is with me today. Danielle is a foreclosure partner at Field Law. And today we're doing what we call are you ready? We're doing a field trip. A field trip. I just thought it was a great name for what I plan to do, which is to chat with various lawyers at Field, which is it's certainly a big regional firm with lots and lots of legal horsepower, covering many, many things. And I think there's a whole ton of things in there that you as a group would like to know. And we're going to bring them to you over the course of time as we do other field trips. But today's field trip number 1. So we're gonna chat with Danielle. We're gonna get a rundown from her on foreclosures. We're gonna get to be able to ask lots of questions. I'm gonna ask a bunch of questions, and so Wayne's gonna bring Danielle in. Bring her in, Wayne. I'll just embarrass her a little bit.
Great.
Because that's what we do. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Barry.
So, folks. So I'm new at Field, right? I've only been there since April 1st. And you know of people kind of peripherally, but once you're in a firm with them, then you try to learn more. I mean, I got there in April 1 to get a notice from the managing partner that there would be nobody in the office and everyone was working from home. So I joined up with a bunch of ghosts as far as I could tell. And I met a few people and Danielle and I still haven't met in person, but we've done some Zoom things. So in getting ready for this meeting today, I mean, what do you do when you're going to work with somebody and have a new interaction? You Google them. So this is kind of a two-pronged thing. So we always talk about diligence. As investors, you have to accomplish enough diligence so that you can say you have done your due diligence. And that when you reach that point, you can make a buying decision, whether it's to say yes to a buy or no to a buy. But so I was doing some diligence. And if you Google Danielle's name on the first page of Google, it's Danielle Bourgeois, Field Law. Danielle Bourgeois, Field Law. It's all Danielle and Field Law. But if you get onto the second page of Google, and that's what I'm talking about, you have to dig deeper sometimes to find out. You would find out that Danielle was an all-star with the U of A Pandas hockey team over a number of years. Canadian hockey champ, I think 4 years. U of A Hockey Wall of Fame. She coaches hockey. And of course, as a sideline, she runs marathons and does other ultra distance things. And if that isn't enough on the athletic side, she's a rising star as awarded by the Lexpert people. And that isn't even all of the stuff that she is. So folks that do stuff like that do other things. And guess what? They do. They rise to the occasion and they perform at the top because that's the kind of people they are. And so that's what I found out about Danielle when I was Googling her, and I didn't know any of that until like yesterday. So Danielle, I'm embarrassed to say that I didn't know that about you, but I'm glad I know it now. So that, folks, that's a bit about Danielle. And by the way, if we ever get to go watch hockey again, if you want to watch some great hockey, you go watch a Pandas game or a Bears game at the Claire Drake Arena. It's just a fabulous place to watch hockey. Great craft beer, inexpensive. Not too much to watch the games, and it's high-level, intense, competitive hockey. So, and you can get out of there without having to mortgage your firstborn. So, that's just a little hint on when hockey comes back. Go and do that. Okay, so Danielle, before we get started, I just wanted to know, just for my own kind of edification, I guess, I mean, you're a foreclosure person now. You're a partner at Field. Foreclosures is your area. How did you gravitate to that? Because when you start out, I mean, you kind of do everything, and then you sort of narrow it down. How did you narrow it down? And I mean, do you like foreclosures? Tell us a bit about that.
So actually, my when I articled, my litigation principal, Sandy Beer, was the head of the foreclosure group in at Field. And so I did a little bit of that when he was my principal, but then when I became an associate, I didn't do much of it. And then he just approached me one day because they were looking to add an associate to the group. And honestly, at first, I wasn't really sure it's something I wanted to do just based on what I knew about foreclosures and sort of oh, I feel like I'm going to be taking people's homes away. And that sort of, this is not what I envisioned doing as a lawyer. But Sandeep was like, okay, fine. How about you try it for a year? And if you don't like it, you won't hurt my feelings if you tell me that. I'm like, are you sure? And he's like, yes, you won't hurt my feelings. And I don't know, as it turned out, we have a great group at Field. We have a great team at Field. And I mean, that was probably in 2012. So 2011 actually. So 9 years later, here I am. Me and my other partner, Lindsay Miller, head up the foreclosure group now at Field. And yeah, like I said, it's a challenging area. I get in court a lot, which I like. I like to have that practice, and I really enjoy going to court. You do end up getting to help people as much as you can, and you even help people even though what you're doing is not great. You get to help them and ease them into the process, and so that's kind of the best way I can describe it.
Okay. Well, that's a good explanation of how it worked. And I'm really okay. So I'm learning something else. So, folks, we're talking now today to a foreclosure lawyer with a heart.
A big heart. I have a big heart. It's
a big heart.
Yeah.
A big heart. And so, Danielle, this is for our group, for our creative real estate education group, and for the focus workshops that I teach. The what we say to people all the time, every time, and we keep emphasizing and emphasizing it, is that we believe the best way to achieve and move forward is to play for win-win, and that you never beat people up and you never take advantage of them. And if as an investor someone's in trouble and they come to you and you can see that there's another exit for them that would be better than whatever the deal is you're proposing, we say, you got to tell them about that. You got to try and steer them to the best solution that you can see for them. And if it ends up being you, that's fine. But if there's another one, don't take advantage. So, I mean, that's kind of how we all look at it. We try and help people as much as we can. And of course, you can't help everybody, can you?
No, you can't. That's just how it works. No.
It's just how it is. Okay, so we're kind of aligned here in how we look at things. Let's get on to foreclosures generally. And so, I think what most people understand is that a foreclosure shows up when a borrower is in trouble, and I'm guessing they miss a payment or two with their lender. And does the lender shoot it off to you 10 minutes after they miss their first payment? Or, what does the lender do when a borrower starts to be in trouble? And just tell us how it routes to you and kind of what the timing is.
Well, I mean, sometimes it depends on the lender, but generally speaking, lenders do try and work with mortgagors, particularly when they're in tough circumstances. They've lost a job or they have health issues or something like that. So they do try, and I would say use litigation as a tool of last resort. So by the time things get to my office, either it's a situation where there's multiple months of missed payments and no indication of their ability to catch up on those payments, or usually it's kind of midway through the year, you get the tax notifications rolling in. And oftentimes they can be quite large, like they can be in the $10,000 range. And so if there's not a solid plan in place to pay those, then unfortunately that's when it gets sent to our office, and we proceed to issue a demand.
Okay, so likely with the lender, there's maybe a phone call or a couple of phone calls, a polite letter. And does a demand letter ever come from the lender, or does that always come from you?
It 9 times out of 10 comes from us.
Okay. So the lender does what they can do. They wait as long as they can wait. They send it to you. You issue a demand letter saying, "Hi, folks. I represent the lender. If you don't pay or do something by such and such a date, this is what will happen." Is that kind of how the demand letter reads?
Yep. It's typically 10 days. And then after the expiry of the 10 days, if we don't hear from them or if there's no repayment plan in place, then we proceed with the statement of claim.
All right. So you issue the statement of claim. That's where you set out all of the claims by the lender. And what about timing? I mean, if you get instructions from a lender saying, "Okay, Danielle, here's another one. These folks are in default. Please carry on." I mean, from the time you get that to the time you can issue the statement of claim, how long does that take? And what do you have to do to get ready for the statement of claim?
So typically our group basically gathers basic information like the mortgage documents are the biggest one. And so we turn out the demand, and then in that 10 days, we get ready to issue a statement of claim, which we can turn out pretty quickly. The 10 days expires, we get updated figures from the client. We draft that statement of claim. It gets filed. Service then happens as soon as we can after filing. Sometimes you run into service issues. You have to get an order to assist with service. And then once the statement of claim is served, the defendant or mortgagor has 20 days to respond with either a statement of defense, which is basically denying the claim, or a demand for notice, which is basically saying, you know what, you're right, we haven't paid our mortgage, so do what you got to do, but just keep us notified of what you're doing. And so then after that point, we file a noting in default, which is basically, well, if nothing is filed, then we file a noting in default. And then we proceed to order an appraisal. And then depending on the outcome of that appraisal versus what is owing on the mortgage, it determines what our first application is.
And so when you get to that stage, and you have your appraisal, if there's let's go to the two polar extremes. Folks have a ton of equity, or they have basically no equity. How does your process differ once your appraisal tells you what the mortgagor's equity position is?
Okay, so I mean, it depends on whether it's a high ratio mortgage or a conventional mortgage. But regardless of that, if there is a lot of equity, our first application is something called a redemption order. And a redemption order, if there's a lot of equity, essentially stays the action for 6 months to allow that individual time to either sell their property, get refinancing, or catch up on their mortgage arrears if their mortgage hasn't matured. If there's no equity, if it's an insured mortgage, then the next application is usually an order for sale to plaintiff. And so that's if there's no equity or if it's in a deficient position, then it's an order for sale to the lender, sometimes with a deficiency judgment. If it's a conventional mortgage, then it's an application, depending on whether someone lives in the property or not. If it's abandoned, it's usually straight to a foreclosure order, which then the lender takes possession of the property. If there's someone in the property, then we have to list the property for sale under the Law of Property Act. And so that's usually done by sort of the older school way is to do it by judicial posting or list it by Kijiji. Now going back to the redemption order, at the expiry of the redemption period, which is typically a maximum of 6 months for residential real estate, but that can vary also if there's a little bit of equity versus a lot of equity, then it's judicially listed with a realtor, and the list price is what the appraisal price was listed at, and so it gets listed typically for 90 days.
The appraisal. So if I was looking to sell my house and I wanted to get a really good idea of what the sale price is, I could call up an accredited, registered appraiser, and I could say, "Hey, I'm going to sell my house. Tell me what it's worth." Is it exactly the same process when you get an appraisal? I mean, do you hire an accredited appraiser to do it? And is the pricing different, or are there different prices? How does that part work?
Yeah, it's an accredited appraiser, and I mean, depending, it's an opinion, right, by an appraiser who basically looks at other listings and uses comparators in similar neighborhoods, and then either makes adjustments to the list or the market value price based on the quality of the home you're assessing versus the comparators. If it's higher, then you bump it up a little bit more. If the inside or if the interior is average or fair or lesser, then you might knock it down. They look at things like the square footage of the property, the number of bedrooms, if there have improvements been made, like a deck that's in compliance, or there's air conditioning or things like that, that might bump it up. And then conversely, if it's like there's water damage, or the location isn't as nice, or it hasn't been updated, then that might bump the price down, the market value price down in comparison to the comparators.
So that just sounds like a typical appraisal. It's just an appraiser saying what a house is worth, and to them it doesn't matter whether it's a foreclosure or whether it's me as a private citizen.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Now, you talked about differing circumstances when the house is empty versus the house still has the mortgage or someone in it, because it could be tenants of the mortgagor. What if there's someone in the property and they say they're not leaving? Does that slow up your process? If people want to buy, how do we deal with folks who don't want to cooperate and don't want to get out?
So if you're going to list the property, like let's say it's a judicial listing, and you have a mortgagor or a tenant that's not being cooperative with showings, or then typically what you would do is bring an application for vacant possession, and that's basically to get them out, and use a civil enforcement agency if they don't get out. Now, typically when you file the application and serve it, that's usually enough to get them to cooperate, and they get a lot of chances prior to that. And even when you bring the application and when you appear in court, the courts are very inclined to, okay, smarten up. We'll give you another chance. If you don't cooperate, then we'll have to come back and talk. So there's a lot of chances given, but typically that would be the step taken.
So a determined person in the house, whether they're the mortgagor or a tenant, they could stretch out, if they're prepared to just resist a little bit. Sounds like they can stretch it out for couple of months, 3 months, maybe.
Absolutely. And this, particularly in this time where it's hard to get in front of the court quickly.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I want to go back a little bit to the way that you put out the information. So, I mean, in the old days, there's the bulletin board down at the courthouse, and something gets stapled to the bulletin board, and you mentioned Kijiji, and then you mentioned the judicial listing. Our clients and our group, people are always wondering, how do you find foreclosures? So if it's judicially listed, then that's on MLS, and you can work with your realtor and say to them, listen, find me all the judicial listings. Let's talk about it. But do you still do the posting at the courthouse and the Kijiji thing, so that sounds like somebody, if they knew how that worked and they were on it, they could get a leg up and sort of hear about things before they're judicially listed?
Yeah, I mean, the courthouse posting is a bit, it's not really used anymore, and particularly not in times like this. So the Kijiji one is usually the go-to. And I would say, if you're looking for foreclosure properties on Kijiji, you'll notice some very boilerplate, plain language with a property for sale. So there won't be a lot of expressive things about it, or like personalized, this is close to a cute park if you have a child. Like, you won't see a lot of language like that. It will be, this property is listed for sale, contact, and there, it's very plain. It will be very plain.
And so when it says contact, does it just sort of, does it say contact Jane and here's a number, or contact Danielle? Who does it say to contact?
So they have to send in offers to the courthouse directly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, would it be then obvious from the plainly written ad that you respond to the courthouse and everybody go, aha, this is a foreclosure?
Yeah, I mean, it should be.
Okay.
And for the most part, it gets posted as like I'm not super familiar with Kijiji, but like a top ad There are requirements that the court has in the language that you kind of bump it up a bit because it's only posted typically for 5 days. Like, it's a very short period of time. So if you see something that's posted for a short period of time, that's another indicator.
Jump on it.
Yeah.
Jump on it. Something else that I hear from clients and members of our group is they go, it's really hard to get information about the specifics and the details of a foreclosure. So they might, so the realtor has introduced them to a judicial listing, and they want to get details, but they say that it's just hard going through the realtor to get information, and it's really hard if it hasn't quite reached the judicial listing stage. So let's start with that. Somebody is being foreclosed on. They advertise and say, "Got to sell my house fast. Contact me at." And so one of our group calls, and the person answers and says, "Yeah, well, I'm being foreclosed on, so I have to do something. I've got 6 months to redeem, or 3 months, or whatever the number is. I've got some time to do it, and I think if I could sell it, I'd be better off. So yeah, I'm interested in talking." So of course, our client or investor now wants to dig information out. And is it possible to get accurate information about where the foreclosure is at in the process, about what the costs are to date, and maybe some indication of how those will, are they static or are they going to increase? People say sometimes it's like trying to grab a, cotton candy. It's hard to get hard facts.
Yep. So, I mean, the long and the short of it is, if you can get your hands on the court documents, that's going to solve a lot of your questions. So if you can ask the seller, and I don't know how willing they're going to be to give this information, for a copy of the affidavit of default and the affidavit of value. So the affidavit of default is the document sworn by the lender stating how much is left owing on the mortgage. And it will list the per diem in there, and that continues to run throughout the foreclosure. The affidavit of value is the appraisal, and it's just put into an affidavit of form to properly get it before the court. If the seller is not willing to give that to you, then you can pull a court search, and you can either do that in person at the courthouse. You can do it through services like Elder Wall, and you can do a search for the action, knowing the name of the seller, and you can see where the foreclosure is at. So if you see that you can ask for what they call a procedure card, and on the procedure card it will list all of the documents that have been filed at the courthouse. And if you see the last one is a redemption order, you might ask for a copy of that from the courthouse, and that'll give you an indication of how much time you're dealing with. And again, that affidavit of default is going to say, again, if there's a redemption order, there's going to be equity. But if you want to do your own calculation of what the payout would look like, you'd want the affidavit of default.
All right. So if we have a cooperative mortgagor, you can ask for the affidavit of default and the affidavit of value, which will give you the appraised number and the lender's calculation of what's owing. So that's obviously two very important numbers for anybody who's looking at this. And when Danielle said you can search at the courthouse, and I think you said in the Mogul presentation, those are public. This is public records. That this is available once a statement of claim is filed and an action is started. Anybody can search for that information. So that I think that's important for people to know.
Absolutely.
Now, one other component of this, of course, is you have to be paid for what you're doing, and what's the range of legal account that is going to get added to what the mortgagor, what the borrower owes, and I'm guessing it must have a range. If nobody protests, nobody files anything, nobody objects to anything, you're just able to roll through with your normal actions that you would take without anybody saying boo. That's one end. If you've got a mortgage or a borrower who fights and claws for every opportunity to say everything, that's probably at the other end. So is there a range of kind of legal fee that people have to know that they need to add to what is owing?
Yeah, I mean, typically when you're at the redemption order stage, it's probably around 2,500 to $3,000 at that stage. Like assuming it's not an overly complicated file. But if you're at the stage where it's being listed and there's been difficulties, and you may not know this, and only the procedure card would tell you that, then you may be looking at something upwards of $5,000 to $6,000 if it ends up going to an order for sale vesting title. Now, an order for sale vesting title is when it's judicially listed, and there are a number of offers, or even just one offer during the 90-day judicial listing period, and then that has to get placed before the court for court approval. And so when you get to that later stage, I mean, you never really know how much trouble's been had, but that's kind of roughly the range you're looking at.
And what other costs would the court or the lender incur apart from legal fees and disbursements and GST? What about property management fees or insurance or taxes, or those things all add to the number?
Absolutely. Those things add to the number. And when you're looking at a redemption order, that should all be broken down in the redemption order as to what's been paid to date. You can also pull tax searches if you're that curious. But property management fees typically, I mean, they're typically not incurred if the property is occupied. They're typically only incurred when the property is vacant, and it's sort of bi-weekly checks and sometimes weekly checks like in the winter, just because there's a risk that if it gets cold, like you want to make sure the utilities are on and that kind of thing. And then of course, if it's judicially listed, the realtor fees will also be added in terms. It'll be a part of the consideration for approval of the court offer.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the property management side. So you discover, or someone discovers, that the mortgagor borrower has moved out, and you send your folks in. I'm gathering that there's probably some stories to tell about what, not you find, but folks who work for you in the lender, what they found when they take over a house when the folks have left.
Yeah, I made a little list, Barry, because I mean, in terms of funny stories, like that's kind of the funniest it gets in terms of like haha funny, as opposed to like self-rep crazy funny, which not everyone finds funny. But some things that have been left behind. So you always get like pictures by the property inspector, and those tend to be funny. So I mean, so some of the less funny things you'll find, like sometimes you find things like weapons, and so you have to call the RCMP, and those have to be secured. There's been a couple instances of like stolen vehicles, for example. But the two kind of funniest things that I could think of is this one recently where the house, like there had been a bunch of water damage, and this person moved their stuff out, but they were a bit of a junk collector. And so the stuff was kind of scattered all over the floor, except for in this one bedroom. There was this mannequin wearing a red dress. And that was like the only thing in the room. And it was like hilarious and super creepy at the same time. That was quite funny. And then this other time, I get this email from my paralegal being like, so-and-so left a donkey behind. And I was like, okay, what are you talking about? And so she flipped me a picture from the property inspector, and there's this like cute donkey, and this is obviously an acreage. And so there's this like cute donkey in the field, like just kind of looking at the camera. And I was like, it was hilarious. And then I was like, okay, we got to get animal control, like this poor thing.
Yeah, well, I guess, when folks move, all kinds of things show up, and, and you never can tell. It's maybe that's part of why you like this. It's the surprises that that show up. I'm sure it's
Definitely.
more than that. Just going back to gathering information. So folks, as you listen to Danielle talk, foreclosures are a pretty technical, legal bit of procedure that has to be gone through. It's it's procedure, I think, that's pretty well known. There are so many foreclosures that come before the court that they're pretty sliced and diced about what you have to do and how you have to do it, and nobody's recreating the wheel every time they make a foreclosure shows up. So it's pretty sliced and diced. And when Danielle talks about getting information, so yes, you can get information at the courthouse. Really, if you know the name of the person who owns the property, who's being foreclosed on, you can do that kind of a search, and maybe if it's Smith, you're going to get a whole bunch of things to look at, but you can get a look at the courthouse record, including the procedure card. And so, like everything else, if you're going to work in foreclosures, you're going to have to do a few of them and go through the process a few times. You're going to have to talk to a realtor and get some information. You're going to maybe have to put in an offer. You're going to have to maybe bid with other people. You're going to have to get to the courthouse. If you can't get material from the mortgage or borrower because they don't have that affidavit of value or the appraisal, the affidavit of default, then yeah, you're going to have to kind of get down to the courthouse. And I don't even know how that's working in COVID, because you may or may not have access, and that may be more difficult for you, but it is all public information. And if you want to do foreclosures, as Danielle has mentioned other times, you're going to have to be patient about putting in time and effort to learn the process and to be able to gather information. Some bits of this go really quickly, and some of it takes a long time. If there's lots of equity in the property and people think they can work their way out of it, well, they get 6 months if there's some equity. So that may go on hold. On the other hand, that's an opportunity for you to work with the mortgage or borrower to see whether or not there is some way for you to help them. I mean, it depends what the reason they're in trouble can be different for everybody. And so you have to use your investing knowledge and your analysis of whether you could make this property work and at what price it would, what it would take to make it work, in order to kind of tell you what your next steps are. But you have to be prepared to put in some hard work. Foreclosures, it's not cherry picking. You just don't go out in the yard and pick a bucket of cherries and it's just like that. It's not. It can be very difficult, and you need a lot of patience, and it can be quite frustrating for you as an investor. But like everything else, if you put in some time and effort, you can learn how to do stuff. So just wanted to talk about that. So Danielle, let's talk a little bit about the process. So we've got a judicial listing. You've got your own realtor. The court has listed the property with a different realtor. And so you want to put in an offer. So you put in an offer just like you would for any property. You work with your realtor, you write up an offer, and I'm sure the court is very good about listening to all sorts of conditional offers, and they fall over themselves to fix pops in the drywall and cracks in the steps and get permits for decks. And the courts are, no, that's not it.
No, very unfortunately with this type of thing, it's as is, where is. And so, I mean, it's important if you can go and view the property. That's important, because that's your one shot to get a sense for what you're taking on. So you're going to line that up with the realtor. Part of the information piece is important because, typically speaking, unless you're within sort of the 20% range of the appraisal price, your offer is likely not going to get accepted, or it could get beat. And so sometimes, your realtor is going to be helpful for you, because they're going to be able to tell, like, in terms of showings, they can ask the other realtor, get some information in terms of other offers. And so when you're going in there, it's not a bad idea to set a lower price, particularly once you get a sense for when the application is to approve an offer. And you can wait to see if other offers come in. And then right before the application, you can try and put in a slightly higher offer if you can't get enough information about the other offers. Now, you can get in contact with the law office, or have your realtor get in contact with the law office to get that information. They may not disclose other offers, but these offers get put in an affidavit, again, because that's the only proper way to get the evidence before the court, which gets filed at the courthouse. And so you can ask for a copy of the affidavit of value. You can also ask for a copy of the other court documents, like the affidavit of default and affidavit of value. Sometimes paralegals aren't so willing to give you those. They might make you go through the whole pain of going to the courthouse and stuff like that, but it doesn't hurt to ask. It never hurts to ask, and you might find someone in a good mood who's like, sure, these are public documents. I don't care. I'll give them to you. But that affidavit of offers will show you what the other offers are that are going before the court, and it may give you an opportunity to put in another offer. Now, in these days, we're all appearing by WebEx usually. You can still show up in person to court, but you'll want to ask the law firm for the WebEx information to appear. And you can not physically appear, you can virtually appear. And if you can even argue on the day of, well, I have another offer. And basically, if there's a lot of people that show up or a lot of offers in place and a lot of competing offers, the court likely will adjourn the application to give everyone sort of one last chance to file a sealed bid and then basically go to court one final time where there's an unveiling of the bids and the higher offer succeeds. Now, as Barry mentioned before, these offers actually have to be unconditional. They can't be conditional. And so that's why that first viewing is very important to get a sense for a lay of the land, because what you're taking on, as I mentioned, is as is, where is.
So as is, where is. So I think we understand that. Folks, if you haven't ever seen a foreclosure offer, it's typically the MLS, the multiple listing service standard real estate purchase contract. And then it has usually a schedule A attached to it. Those schedules can run to 2 and 3 and 4 pages. It's basically lawyers saying as is, where is for 3 or 4 pages is kind of what it is. And
yep.
the actual standard offer itself has great chunks of it all cut out and just taken away. So it's kind of funny that in the end it's a legal description and a price and an as is, where is, but takes 7 or 8 pages to actually do it.
It absolutely is. Like, there could be one sheet that just says as is, where is, and that's all it says. And that's, I mean, it is rather ironic for sure.
All right, so then I've had this question show up for me. So people have gotten to the stage where they want to put in an offer, and they go and view the property. And so if they get to view the property when the mortgage or borrower has moved out and abandoned anything they didn't want to take with them, is that the way the property stays? Does it just stay like that, and that's as is, where is?
Typically, yes. Basically, when a property is abandoned, we get a preservation order or something to secure the property, and the property manager goes through and basically just removes anything that's going to continue to deteriorate the value of the property. So they'll take the food out of the fridge, they'll shut the water off, they'll make sure there's no water damage. They'll make sure the heat is on. But other than that, typically they don't touch anything as long as it's not going to deteriorate the value of the property. Okay.
So then I think it's important for our listeners to know that if that's the status of the property when they go to view it, that's the way it's going to be. But they can have some confidence if they look at it and go, okay, well, this is a bin and a half worth of garbage. I just know that when I buy it, I'm going to have to get a bin and clean it out. But they should have some confidence that the property is going to stay like that, because it's under the court's control and with a property manager watching over it. So absolutely, it's not going to get any worse. All right, let's go back to values. It's kind of interesting to hear that that there's kind of a process you can go through. You have to be within 20% of the appraised value, the what shows up in the affidavit of value. If you're below that, the court isn't going to pay attention to. If there's a lot of competition for the property, 20% may put you out the door because there's lots of people bidding higher than you. But as a, as a tactical thing, to know that you can put in an offer that will at least get looked at roughly 20% under the affidavit of value appraisal number, and realize that you have another opportunity to raise your bid. I think that's a really important thing for people to understand.
Yeah, and sorry, Barry, I should say, like, when I use the 20%, but that's assuming there's a lot of equity, right? That's always going to depend on how much equity is actually in the property, because a lender can't actually put an offer before the court that isn't going to satisfy the amount owing plus realtor fees plus that, so that's why both the affidavit and affidavit of value, or sorry, affidavit of default and affidavit of value are important that way.
Okay. I didn't know that. Okay. So you have to get offers that are enough to pay out everything that's owing at this part of the process. Part of the process. Okay. All right. Also interesting that I'm gathering you don't coach your paralegals to be the way some paralegals are, or some law offices are, as difficult as bloody possible in terms of providing any information. I'm not suggesting you roll over and assign somebody to any inquiry that's going to be full-time taking care of the inquiry, but I mean, do we have a cooperative attitude at Field? What are we like to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, typically we are cooperative. I mean, we have an obligation to serve our clients and try and as part of the lender is basically stepping into the shoes of a mortgagor and is trying to meet the standard of reasonable care and not be negligent in selling the property. And so, sometimes we can be forthcoming with information, but largely that's done through realtors. And I mean, here's the problem, is that the more our office is contacted, that results in increased costs to the mortgagor. And so there's a real fine line between trying to get some information and then being a pain about it.
Yeah, because I mean, the what you get paid is regulated by the courts, and if the work you've done is within a range that says this is the amount that you get paid as a lawyer, excessive numbers of calls don't help you get paid more, do they? I mean,
it's actually more so because most mortgages have a provision in there that the mortgagor is responsible for full indemnity costs.
Yeah.
And so when you have people looking at the property calling into the law firm, like, those are actual real dollars and cents that the mortgagor is having to pay. It's going to come out of their equity. And so that has to be kept in mind as well. Okay,
so that's good. Yeah, the folks, mortgages say it's one of those documents that says that the mortgage or borrower has to pay all of the costs, including solicitor and client, solicitor costs on his own client basis. You got to pay everything. Got to pay everything. Also interesting, though, is that the way offers get before the court is an affidavit of offers. I mean, you just don't show up and throw the offer itself. An affidavit is produced saying, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I'm, advising the court that we've got 3 offers, and they're attached to this affidavit, and here you go." And so that gets filed. So, folks, as you listen to what Danielle is saying, all of these bits of documentation that we're talking about are documents that actually get filed at the courthouse, become part of the public record. And if there's an affidavit of offers, then that's part of the public record. And then you can see what all those other offers are, which is kind of odd, because I mean, normally people want to know that their offers are kept private, but that's not the way it works in foreclosures. So that's part of people understanding the process and working their way through 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 foreclosures and gathering the information so that you know what these steps are and that you know how to go to the courthouse and get the info.
And I mean, as you get closer to the application, I mean, offers still may be coming in. Paralegals are going to be scrambling to try and get these into affidavit form, but they may not get filed and posted to the court file. So, I would say, from your perspective, basically you're going to ask the paralegal, well, can I have a copy of your unfiled affidavit of offers? Because you're going to get that quicker. And that's going to give you more of an opportunity, because you're going to say, well, I can't get it from the courthouse that quickly. So can I get an unfiled copy?
Right. Yeah. So it's going to be prepared by the law firm, and although it has to be filed, it's sitting there unfiled. And if they'll give it to you, there you go. That works you farther into it. So now you talked about people being able to. Donna's waving at me. Q&A. Yes, baby, we're going to do Q&A. Okay, Q&A till hell won't hold it, for sure. You talked about catching my train of thought here. What's I going to say? Yes, when we're talking about offers, and you said people can go to court, so you can appear virtually by WebEx, and is that just another kind of Zoom or Teams virtual program? Is that what WebEx is?
That's exactly what it is, and that information is going to be on the application itself. So you can actually ask the law office or your realtor to get that information of what courtroom it's in, and you can ask for them to provide you with the WebEx link. But all of those links are also accessible on the Alberta Courts website.
Okay, folks, mark that down. Alberta Courts website and WebEx.
Yeah, and you'll want to go under Queen's Bench scheduling, and foreclosure matters are typically in master's chambers. So you'll want to go to the judicial district. So for us, it would be Edmonton. But if you're in Calgary, obviously it's Calgary and there's Red Deer. But it'll give you. There's typically 2 courtrooms. But like I said, you're going to want to ask for the information from the realtor about what courtroom it's in and make sure you go to the right place.
Okay, so they'll be able to help you out with that part of it. And so I think for most people, the notion of court or being in court or saying anything in court or appearing in court or doing any of that kind of stuff is a bit daunting. So can you give people just a little sense of whether they should be freaked out by showing up on a WebEx foreclosure app to talk about their offer and why the court should listen to them? Or is it not as bad as they might think?
No, it's not as bad. And honestly, my kind of tips are, first of all, so typically court's at 10 a.m., log on at 9:45, check in with the court clerk, ask what number you're on, say what matter you're on, put your name down. It's best if you appear by video. You can appear by just phone, but I will say it's better to appear face to face. And then you can also enter your name, and then make sure you pay attention. And when your matter is called, make sure that you're heard. Now, typically, on a order for sale, vesting title type of application, the court's going to listen to the lawyer, and then they're going to listen to the mortgagor or the mortgagor's lawyer. So you're actually going to have to get your elbows in there. You're going to have, if you have something else to say, if you have a higher offer, and there are other people that are competing, you're going to have to pipe in, and that's going to be tough. But I mean, typically masters don't ask, oh, and is there anyone here that's putting in an offer? They don't ask that. No. They just proceed to talk to the lawyer, and then they give the defendant or the mortgagor an opportunity to talk. So you got to kind of just build yourself up, and then you got to just kind of inject yourself at a certain point.
So you got to, I mean, it's just like you and I are doing right now. So if someone was there who wanted to show up, they go, excuse me, yep, sir,
yep.
Sir,
excuse me, yep, madam. Yeah, exactly.
And then you get to have your say.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a look at some questions. Lots of questions. I'm just going to start for what I can see here. Deb. Wayne.
Please.
All right, Wayne, let's give us some questions here. One I see is, okay, so the owners in default know exactly what's going on.
Yes, they should. Yep.
They've been served with that paperwork. They should know what's going on. Sometimes they're cooperative, sometimes they aren't. Part of working with those people is establishing trust. And if they sense that you're looking to help them, they will show you and give you that stuff and make your life easier. Okay, Wayne, let's have another one. I've looked at a few foreclosures. I noticed the mortgage balance outstanding is posted. How do we use this info to decide on whether or not to make a move? Can properties for less than the mortgage balance? I guess that means can properties be purchased for less than the mortgage balance? Well, Danielle already said that in that first process, the offer has to be enough to pay out the mortgage, pay the realtor, pay the legal fees. So, is that right, Danielle?
That's correct. And honestly, if it's not, the paralegal will advise you that it's rejected.
Okay. All right, Wayne, let's have another one. Do they use Kijiji throughout Alberta? Oh, that's a good question.
Yes, they do. Yep.
Yeah, because Kijiji is Alberta wide. It's a good program if you guys haven't heard of it yet. You have to get this. This is me being a dinosaur on things technological. Donna, relax over there. She's practically all right. Would the word foreclosure be clearly indicated in Kijiji postings?
Probably not.
Oh,
No.
it's a generic kind of, it's generic wording, whereas investors who have learned how to write ads and how to appeal to people, you'll look at that ad and go, oh my God, do they really want to sell this house? Look for ones where it looks like the seller isn't motivated and doesn't really want to sell.
Yeah.
That might tell you. All right, Wayne, give us another one. Will Danielle be able to provide a flow chart of foreclosure timeline for this group? We're not committing to Danielle to that kind of stuff. She'll think about that, and maybe she can do it, and maybe she can't. But we'll take that under advisement, and then we'll get back to the group once we know the answer to the question. Could a list of common legal terms be listed that one could research to be familiar with foreclosures? If somebody goes to go to my website, barrymaguire.ca, and look under foreclosures, I've written 2 or 3 or 4 articles about foreclosures, including some that are quite technical and have a ton of information on those legal terms. So Neil, you could start with that. Go to barrymaguire.ca, search foreclosures, look at the 2 or 3 articles, and then you can get back to us if you're still not, if you need more information on some of the terms.
Well, this is a good one. What happens if no bids? So if there are no bids and there still remains equity in the property, because that, keep in mind the per diem continues to tick, the taxes continue to add on. If there's no bids, then typically an updated like a CMA, if it's only been a couple of months, like 3 months, a CMA is done on the property, and there's an extension on the judicial listing, usually for a further 90 days. And then depending on the outcome of the CMA, it's usually reduced. So the price usually drops at that point, and then it's extended for a further 90 days.
So no bids means something's gone wrong in the process, because there's usually an inordinate amount of interest in foreclosures because people think they can buy properties inexpensively. So I'm guessing you don't see too many no bid situations.
Well, this is a good question. Does a forced sale from a lender in second or third position proceed the same way? I just came across a property where the main mortgage was paid and in good standing, but the second was forcing sale. So typically, there would have to be enough of a purchase price for there to be enough to pay out that first mortgage, and then also, depending on the second mortgagee, pay a good chunk of what they have if they've pulled the trigger on the foreclosure proceedings.
Okay, yeah, so it's roughly the same way. It's just if you're the lender in second or third position, you have to get enough to pay that first mortgage lender and all their costs. So yeah, and there may not be a whole bunch left for you.
Well, and lenders in second position typically do take a bit of a haircut for sure.
Which, before we get into this next question, I just want to say, if someone has lent money and they're not being paid and they need a foreclosure lawyer, I mean, do you do private foreclosures as well as for lenders?
Yep, for sure.
All right, so folks, if you've lent money through an RRSP mortgage, or if you lent money to a pal, or if you've lent money and you're not being paid, then you can contact Danielle, and she may be able to help you. I'm not saying she will help you or can help you. She may be able to help you depending, but she does that kind of work, so she can enforce those private mortgages. Next question, what do we got?
So this one has to do with how it sounds like there's quite a bit of hassle in the process. Now, patience is very important in this process, particularly right now when there's a lot of delays in the court system. I mean, at the end of the day, typically the prices that properties go for in foreclosures are lower than what you'd have on the open market if you were purchasing it from someone who just wanted to sell their property, because people who just want to sell their property typically are looking to make money off of it. Whereas in a foreclosure case, it's a distrained individual. And so at this point, like, they're just trying to look to lose as little as possible. And so, I mean, that is basically the upside to going after a foreclosure listing.
So yeah, just to recap there's a lot in the process. There's hoops to jump through, and you do have to be patient because the court is running this. Really, Danielle is kind of ordering along, but it's under the supervision of the court, and you have to work and accomplish enough diligence to say, is this property for what the affidavit of value says and what the costs are? Is it worth it to me to pursue? And so, I mean, foreclosures, folks, are not the holy grail of investing. They're really not. There might have been a time when they were, but there's a lot of investors out there. So you got to work this area of investing just as hard as you have to work other areas. Question: is there any way to find a property that is being foreclosed on but has not reached the point where it is listed for sale?
No, not unless the owner is somehow advertising that.
Yeah. So it wouldn't be from Danielle's end, but people, that's where your marketing, depending on how you do it, if you're looking to help people and that's the kind of advertising you're doing, you may get responses from people in pre-foreclosure, and that's how you find those deals. Yep. CMA, what is that?
Sorry, it's a competitive market analysis. So it's basically like a short form appraisal where you're literally taking square footage of a property in a certain area. You're looking at recent sales, and you're finding out the price per square foot and applying that to the actual subject property.
And who usually does those competitive market analysis?
The realtors.
Comparative. Did you say comparative or competitive?
It's comparative. Sorry.
Comparative market. So it might.
No. Yeah.
Donna.
Thanks, Donna.
Neil says, is there a common day of the month which foreclosures are heard in court?
No, it can be any day.
Any day. There's no foreclosure day. It could be Friday, foreclosure day. Nope. Let's see. What's this one?
Bids are sealed. Yeah. So are there situations where bids are sealed? So yeah, if it's a really highly competitive, lot of competitive bids, and you get bidders that show up in court, typically the court will adjourn the matter for a week or even for 2 days, and will direct that sealed bids be delivered to the law firm that is representing the lender. And so it's a sealed bid process at that stage.
So are we out of the ability to get the affidavit of offers scenario?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. All right.
It's sealed. Yep.
Okay. So that's good to know. That's good to know. So highly competitive is likely to be sealed. And that's why, folks, you need to get to the property and do your viewing. You have to make your own analysis of what you think the property is worth and why it works for you. Then you can better dig into that kind of process where the bids are sealed. How long can an average foreclosure take to be done with the whole process and you get the keys?
That's a tough one to answer because it really depends on how much equity is there. Like, if there's not a lot, it's going to be sooner. If there is quite a bit, it's going to be 9 months, 10 months.
9 or 10 months, yeah. So it can go on and on. It can go on and on. JB Cabral says, how to find a statement of claim at Queen's Bench.
There's a counter at the Queen's Bench, filing counter, that you can do court searches at. You can also go to the court website, and I think they have a form that you can fill out. And then there's a company called Elderwall that also will pull court searches for you. So you would just Google Elderwall, ELDORWAL.
Yeah, so Elderwall is one of those companies that helps law firms and other people work their way around the courthouse. What do they call those companies?
Like court runners.
Court runners, yes, court runners. And so the Court of Queen's Bench is in the courthouse. and it's the clerk of the court that you're looking to see, and it's divided up into various aspects. It's Court of Queen's Bench that you're looking for. And, you know, Danielle, I think we might have come to, yeah, Wayne says that's it. So I think we've answered all the questions. Any kind of finishing comments for any last bit of coaching for our group members who are interested in doing foreclosures? And yeah, so just a finishing comment.
So the one finishing comment is just also another tip. If you come across a foreclosure where there's not a lot of equity, don't give up. And you can't, and there's not a bid process. Sometimes, lots of times, the lender will foreclose on the property, get a final order for foreclosure, and then will turn around and list the property themselves. And so it's not the end of the road. If a lender takes back a property, there's also the ability to put in offers with the lender selling the property through a realtor. That's my last closing remarks. But patience.
So that is now the property is foreclosed on. The title is in the lender's name. And now the lender's just like any seller, but he wants to get rid of the property because lenders are not in the owning the property business. They're in the lending business. So no matter what they tell you, they want the money. They want to get out. Yeah. And there's your chance where if you missed it on the foreclosure round, you can get it in the kind of the short sale round, I guess you would say.
That's right.
Wow.
Thanks very much, everyone, for your attention and your questions.
Thanks, Danielle. How did that hour go? Man, we zipped through it. We're 6:03. It seems like we just started. So thank you very much for showing up and being a good sport and answering all these questions. The group certainly appreciates it, and I appreciate it. And so, folks, that's our first field trip. I thought it was fun. We're going to go on some more. So we're going to say goodnight now. Thanks, everyone. And we're going to sign off. All right, Wayne, take us out. Night all.